Ninja and Flannel, I've got an awesome opportunity today to correspond with some teenagers of Gen Z. And they've sent in a list of questions, concerns, and everything concerning gun control, gun laws, violence, and all of things of that sort. And they've come up with some really good stuff. You can actually see a lot of intelligence here. So we're going to be going through a bunch of different questions and issues and giving the answers best I can according to my knowledge and what I believe about it. Here we go. To start out, I want to talk about my perspective on these issues to better be able to convey this information. So politically, I'm not blindly right or blindly left because I believe that blindly right or left is just blind. So I try to base decisions based on data, facts, and especially history. So as far as guns go, I try not to be just obsessively, no matter what, they're not taking my gun.
They're precious. We mustn't let them have it. We can't let them take it from us. We mustn't let them have it.
So I try to be a bit more logical and evaluate data. If people bring up good questions, I try to actually and logically consider them to make sure that I'm not blindly supporting something that I shouldn't. It's better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war. Unless you're Samwise Gamgee. So enough with the shenanigans, let's go through this list and start answering some of these questions. Alright, so correspondence number 1. First question they write is, what is the reasonable approach for gun control / restriction? Well, the only thing I would support is a legit and working background check, which we already have. Now, if somebody has a felony, they can't buy a gun. If they are insane and they have medical records that show they're insane, they can't buy a gun. If you have restraining orders, I don't know, I've never had one, but I don't think you can buy a gun. It's on the checklist when you buy one to ask if you have that or not. But that's about it. Background check, and that is where it stops. The downside to that is that background checks are supposed to just make sure you're not on a list that you can't buy them, and you're good, but the ATF secretly takes them and makes illegal gun registries, which is not conspiracy. They were actually busted for this a few years ago. So, that answers that question. Next question. What should the legal age be to carry a gun? Right now, it's 21 to carry a handgun if your state even allows it. However, if it benefits the politicians, you can be in the military and at 18, full send with machine guns and everything. So it seems a little messed up that you can be a full adult and use a gun for them, but not use a handgun for your own protection. So I believe that if you're a legal adult, wherever they put that age, which is 18, you should be able to own any type of gun. My take on it. How would we prevent homicides while also not having too strict of gun laws and infringing on the Second Amendment? Well, the issue is often looked at as the item used for these crimes, which is a gun, but rarely why the person is doing this. So what I would see is social issues, mental issues, spiritual issues, all things like that. For example, there is very close relations between mental health facilities and institutions closing down, the introduction of psychiatric drugs and antidepressants, all of those going down at the same rate that all of mass shootings and violence goes up. So the issue for the gun laws, it's not going to be more gun laws as illustrated in places like LA and Chicago, which is some of the worst gun crimes with the highest amount of gun laws and restrictions, directly proportional. But I would believe it's a social issue and a mental health issue that needs to be corrected instead. Next page. How do other countries regulate gun control? Well, most of them are extremely strict, zero tolerance. And the homicide rate gets worse, usually. In most cases, it gets worse. So then what they do is they start restricting other items and just going right down the line. For example, Ireland, you're not even allowed to carry a pocket knife anymore. And believe it or not, if you carry something that the authorities deem too pointy or sharp, that's not a knife, they can get you for that too. So once the gun is removed, then they just start restricting more and more things, crossbows, things like that. They start going right down the line, restricting more and more. But most other countries are like that, way stricter. Next question, would fewer guns result in less gun violence? Well, in theory, if you don't own any ladders, you're not going to fall off of a ladder because you don't even have one. So with the introduction of more guns, there is going to be the availability for more gun violence because of logic. If there were no guns, no one could shoot anybody. But there are, and they always will be. So that's the hand we're dealt. Next question. How effective would future gun laws be? Well, the problem with gun laws is someone like myself, for all this stuff I have, it's all completely legal. I do not break any laws. I pretty much follow it as closely as I can, even though it turns my stomach. People who are planning to rob you or kill somebody, or they're just insane, they don't care about the penalty of having an illegal gun because they're planning to kill people anyway. So they don't follow the gun laws. Furthermore, it's easier to get guns illegally around all of these laws than people think. I quite honestly don't know how, but most people I have met do know how. They know a guy, when they were a kid, they bought one when they were 14 on the street, things like that. Most people know how to get illegal guns. Not to mention, a lot of times the ATF is just giving them to the cartels. Look up Operation Fast and Furious. It will horrify you. Moving on. Next page. Why are school shootings a strictly American problem? Well, that kind of goes back to having more guns here than everywhere else. But what it really is that we do not handle the mental health issue, and we choose to spend our government money on stupid things rather than security in our schools. For example, at the same time a $3 billion bill was introduced to arm school security and put locking doors and all that stuff, the government said, oh, it's way too expensive, we can never afford it. And then they sent $40 billion to another country that I'm not going to name. So it seems that they really just politicians don't seem to actually care about the schools as much as they would like to tell you they do. They just want to say ban guns. But yeah, I would say that as far as the American problem is the fact that the mental health and that our people won't add the necessary security. Next question. That is a good question. Next question. How much do you think does the mental health system in America affect the amount of shootings that take place? I already mentioned that a little bit. I'll touch it again. It's that when they started introducing antidepressants and eliminating mental health facilities, the shootings started happening more and more and more. And if you actually research these charts independently, look at the decline of facilities, the introduction of drugs, and the amount of shootings, all separate charts, you'll see the similarity, and it is almost perfectly in line. Next question. What do you think is the main cause of shootings? We pretty much already touched that. But yeah, that would be the other stuff. Next page. What is a common type of gun you were able to obtain? Now, this gets interesting. So, if you go state to state, you will have completely different laws. If I cross the border into a state right next to me, pretty much everything behind me is illegal. So I don't go to that state. Now, the messed up part is this now creates two classes of citizens with different levels of rights. So just because a certain person lives in, say, New Jersey or California, they're not allowed to own the very same things that I have behind me on this wall, just because of where they live. So they're actually restricted and it's oppressing their American rights that I have freely, even though neither of us are criminals. They're technically getting the same penalty as a felon who's not allowed to buy guns just for living in that state. So if people want to talk about equality, the states with the strict gun laws do not have equality. Next question. What are some basic requirements you need to meet to be able to purchase a gun legally? You cannot be a felon. You cannot have known mental illnesses. You can't have restraining orders, and you need to be an American citizen. For rifles, you need to be 18. For handguns, you need to be 21. Those are the base requirements everywhere. Now, you get into different states, there's more. You need to list. Actually, I can't even say it. There's so many different rules in states. Some states make you wait several weeks to get your gun. Just if you're crazy, they want your brain to cool down, I guess. But yeah, that's that. Third question, what is your favorite gun and gun legal activity? That's a good one. So I really enjoy two-gun competitions. They're similar to three-gun, where three-gun is rifle, pistol, shotgun. Two-gun is just rifle and pistol. The ones I do, you go from point blank, going through different shoot houses, and there's different requirements. Then you stretch all the way out to about 500 yards. So it really rounds you with your pistol and rifle and every part of it. I usually wear, pull it up here, a bulletproof plate carrier just to make it more interesting. So I got weight on me. It's a sport. You're tired by the end. So two gun competitions are definitely my favorite. Favorite types of guns, I really like 9mm pistols. You know, they hold a lot of rounds. This one holds 19. The other mag for it holds 23. So 9mm pistols with red dots and flashlight, things like that. I really enjoy these style of pistols. The rifle, I would go with it. That's a tough one. So we have like a CZ Bren, which is a little more obscure. I really like the AK-47 platform. It's a lot of fun. But aside from fun, ultimately, my 10-inch AR-15 is the go-to. It's nice and short. It's a registered SBR, in case the feds are watching. It's registered SBR. It's got, you know, good weight to it. I have a magnifier, so when I shoot out to 500 yards, I just go like that. I've got a 3 power to zoom. It's got a little flashlight on there. It's the Barbie for men. You can part this thing out. You can build them pin by pin from scratch, assuming you bought the lower registered portion or serialized portion legally. So the AR is definitely my go-to for all practical aspects, where my Strybog is my actual favorite. This thing's a little 9mm with this. It's got to have a suppressor on here so it's nice and quiet. This thing is a lot of fun. So we're going to take a small break from our lists and go over the ATF a little bit and the NFA, which is the National Firearms Act. And if you don't know, the ATF is alcohol, tobacco, and firearms. So the NFA, I don't remember when they did it, but it basically bans assault rifles, and you have to have a Class 3 license to own them, build them, all that stuff. So people talk about assault rifles floating all over the place. Nobody has assault rifles for the most part. None of these are actually assault rifles. So on that note, an assault rifle, those are fully automatic. With a fully automatic, if you don't know this, you pull the trigger down, it just keeps going until you let off. Or 3-round burst, where you pull it and 3 shots fire. Semi-automatic, you have to pull 1 trigger pull and you get 1 shot. Then you have to release for it to reset, and then pull 1 pull and you get 1 shot. So that's semi-automatic. So this is not an assault rifle. If you don't believe me, this and this have the same exact function. They just shoot different bullets, and you can get this that shoots the same bullets as this. So you can have both of these guns, and they are essentially the same design by function. But because this one, people think it looks sus, they call this an assault rifle, and they think that this is totally okay because there's wood on it, which makes no logical sense, but it apparently appeals to people's emotions, which is what a lot of gun control is based on. So the NFA it regulated machine guns and assault rifles. It then made the rule that if you have a barrel shorter than 16 inches, which is, where's my 16? Right here. Your barrel is shorter than 16 inches, you cannot have a stock. Somehow, this is completely safe, and 11-inch barrel is completely not safe. I don't really know where they got this from, but apparently this is way more dangerous than this. But this would be okay if you did not have a stock on it. Then it's okay because it's just a handgun. That's SBRs. We'll come back to that. So that's the SBRs that are also covered in the NFA. The last thing is suppressors. They want, or silencers as people call them, because they think it's like in 007. But in actuality, if you shoot this suppressor for any length of time, you're going to get hearing damage because they are still loud. I really don't know why they regulate these, to be honest. Now, with the ATF and the NFA, here lies the problem. Instead of going after cartels and gangs and people actually doing the worst and highest amount of crimes, The ATF seems to, in some cases, give the cartels guns, Operation Fast and Furious again, and they really focus on getting real technical details that legitimately only affect the good people with firearms. So here we are. This is recent news in the last year or so. Like I was talking about with SBRs, short barrel rifles, if the barrel's under 16, you cannot have a stock. So the company came out with this. This is called a stabilizing brace. It was designed for veterans and disabled people, children, women, so they can shoot guns more stably without having it just to be like this all the time because it was wobbly and unsafe. So the ATF, of all people, they approved this. They said, yeah, it's a brace. It's not a stock, even though it looks like one. It's not a stock, so this is a legal handgun still, and it's not an SBR. You will not be subject to the NFA. They let a decade pass, and they decide, last year I think it was, maybe a year and a half ago, they decide, you know what, we want to call this a stock again, and we're going to make it a felony and imprison you for 10 years if you have one. The problem is, since they approved it a decade ago, 40 million of these have been sold and bought. So they decided all at once, at this date, you are going to be a felon and violating, even though they approved it. Now, there was a bill introduced to reverse this. It was going to have to go through the entire congressional process, through the House, through the Senate, signed by the president, to overturn something that the ATF just made up one afternoon. It's essentially like your local police saying, on this date, anyone driving a Ford goes to prison for 10 years. No more Fords. Law enforcement legislating, essentially. So they did this. There's a huge court battle going on. Still ongoing. We've had some wins. Right now, why I can show this and have this is that there's preliminary injunctions for certain members of certain firearms organizations, as well as a national one. So these are still protected while the court case continues. But this is the problem with the ATF. They use something called Chevron deference that is designed to help them make minute judgment calls about things. And they have used it to make straight up new laws that could send people unknowingly to prison. Because if I didn't follow this closely, I wouldn't have even known about this stuff. So that is the real problem with the ATF. Other stories you should research, besides Operation Fast and Furious, are things like Ruby Ridge. Look up the story of Ruby Ridge, and that's another example of what the ATF does. So the ATF is just really into overreach, as well as pistol braces, with them making laws that put people in prison outside of Congress and elected officials. They've also done a frames and receivers rule, which you should look up as part of your homework, and a forced reset trigger rule. These are rules, not laws. So they've just made these, and it is causing havoc in the gun community across America. So that's the ATF. Let's get back to the questions. Here we are. How often are school shootings done with a legally purchased firearm? I'm not going to pretend I know. I really don't know how often it's done with a legally purchased one. But I do know, according to logic, that if somebody is psychotic enough to do a shooting, they probably don't mind just buying the gun illegally on the street somewhere, doing the same thing. So I'm not sure it would have an effect. Next question. When guns are purchased legally, will the government obtain the right to revoke their license or certain terms and conditions? Yes. If you commit a felony, they will come take your guns. If you commit a straw purchase, which is a felony, when you buy a gun for someone who's not supposed to have one, they will come take your guns. If you are crazy, they'll come take your guns. This brings us to another heavily debated political topic, red flag laws. Now, I want to make a note that most gun control, in theory, sounds good even to me. It does sound like a great idea, and if not abused, it would work, and it would work well. Now, red flag laws are the idea that you see somebody or know somebody who's very suspicious and you know that they're going to do something bad. You would call and report them, and then the government would come take their guns so they can't cause any harm. Sounds good. However, the criteria is so vague that if you just don't like somebody or somebody doesn't like you, they can call and make something up. The government comes, they take all of your stuff, and you have to prove you are innocent. You don't know who reported you, and you have to watch what you say now. So essentially, you're losing multiple amendments. You're losing freedom of speech because you can say something someone doesn't like. Say you like to shoot guns and someone reports you. You lose the right to face your accuser. You lose the right to due process because you are now guilty until proven innocent. And there's no criteria stopping anyone who just doesn't like you from calling and reporting you and using the government as a weapon. So red flag laws on paper, if they were used properly, they would be good, even to me. But the problem is that it violates several of our amendments. Next question. Does gun control include storage restrictions? Some states do, and they are adding it here and there. That's a debated topic even among gun people of how you should store them, or if people could break into your house and steal them, if your kids get a hold of them. Some gun control does include that, but it just varies state by state, nothing national. Next page. Do you value the Second Amendment right over the safety and lives of people? This is actually a very good question, but it's a very simple answer. The Second Amendment is actually to preserve life and prevent tyranny. So it's not really a do you like Second Amendment or do you value people's lives? They are kind of the one and the same, that the Second Amendment itself is to preserve life. I carry a gun to protect people around me, but I also carry pepper spray with it, so I can try to use non-lethal as a first resort, and hopefully that solves it before having to erase somebody. So yeah, so basically it's to preserve life. To say that they're opposite ends would be incorrect. Next question. What do you think the capacity of a magazine should be? I believe it should be unrestricted because, for one, there are millions and millions and millions of magazines floating around everywhere, and if they banned them now, it wouldn't stop a thing. They're just going to keep going. The only people that would try to abide by these rules are the people who are trustworthy and good because they want to stay out of prison. All right, next question. Do you agree with all the implications, processes to obtain a firearm that we have a right to own? No. No, I do not. There's no reason I should have to pay a special tax on a right given to me by our Constitution to have a barrel that is 6 inches shorter than normal. That is a major violation. I don't agree with those. And in some states, there's worse things than that. I don't agree with them. You look up some of the states like California and Jersey, and it is ridiculous to try to get a gun. New York as well, actually. Let's see here. Next page. How long will these bills be used and how many generations will they affect? How will this affect schools and families? Will there be a need for more gun laws? Well, the gun laws we have don't really work to begin with because psychos and criminals don't follow these rules or care about them. Will it affect schools and families? Families, they're going to lose the ability to protect themselves. And schools, not so much. It's not really going to affect anything. Most states that these shootings happen in are states that already have strict gun laws and already have other defenses. On top of this, all shootings, and I mean all of them, are done on soft targets, places that are gun-free zones by sign. Now, if I'm carrying a pistol and I see a gun-free zone in a state where they can enforce that sign, some states they can't, I wouldn't go there because I don't want to go to jail. Somebody going there to do harm doesn't care about that sign. So now what's happened by a gun-free zone being created is that you've now made it where only the bad guy will have a gun. So you would say that these schools and families will be affected by these gun laws, but it's actually going to affect them negatively by removing the right for them to protect themselves. How long will they be in effect? They're going to be there forever until they are changed politically and legislatively. So whatever happens, it's concrete. For example, the NFA was enacted a long, long time ago. I want to say in the 30s, but I'm not a historian. And it's not gone anywhere yet. Next page. How many mass shootings contain legally obtained weapons? I think we already covered that. How does a bump stock affect mass casualties? Well, the whole bump stock thing is fake news. The only shooting ever recorded with bump stocks was the Vegas one, and that was it. Furthermore, they banned bump stocks, right? The ATF made a rule, just like these pistol braces. That's actually where all these rules came from, that they could just make things up. And I think they said less than 1% of the people who had bump stocks actually complied and turned it in. So the bump stocks that were banned didn't actually go anywhere. The people who have them still have them, and no one's been killed by them. So the bump stock, it doesn't really affect mass casualties at all. In theory, if somebody has one in that situation, I've used one back in the day. They fire very strangely and rapidly, and they're very hard to control. So essentially, whoever is using them is going to run out of ammo very quickly, and they're not going to be able to hit near as many targets. So you might say that having a bump stock might actually help people because they're going to run out of ammo quicker. Next question. Does making extended mags illegal actually affect the casualty rate per shooting? I don't really know, but probably not so much. I don't know if you know how fast you can change a magazine, but me personally, and I'm not a superstar, when I drop a magazine, I can pull it out and be back up and ready to shoot. Prepared about 1.7 seconds. In actuality, if I don't know the gun's gonna be empty, it's usually about 2.5 seconds. So you're talking about stripping everyone of their magazine capacities, and the guy's only gonna have to spend 2 to 3 seconds to reload. So yeah, so the extended mags aren't going to do very much. Moving on, what is the significance of banning bump stocks and how will it stop someone from killing people? Not really at all. We touched that. Bump stocks are they're lame even among gun people. They're dumb. And yeah. Next question, why would upping the age requirement for owning a gun stop school shootings even though most shooters get their guns illegally? I think you answered your own question there. If they're going to get their gun illegally, it would change nothing. Now, when we go to upping the age, if they're going to up the age for firearms, they need to up what is considered an adult. Because if you are upping the age to own firearms, you are now having people who are adults and then a second class of adults. Once again, creating two different tiers of adult, so you're not really a full one until you hit that age. So if they want to talk about raising the age to own firearms, they need to raise the age of what you are as an adult. Vote, drink, drive, work, all that stuff. Then what they're really talking about is making the adult age older. Let's see here. Is there a way to suppress the amount of shootings that happen? Well, like we said, all shootings are done in soft targets, so they need to make the soft targets no longer soft targets. Like we also talked about before, they're adding school security. I believe Pennsylvania has actually put, I think they said 500 million since 2018 to actually add armed guards to schools, and it has helped majorly. And so they could do that, and politicians could quit rejecting bills to do that nationally. That would do it. And then I would say the mental health side, most of this we already covered. Last one. In what locations is there evidence that less restrictive gun laws correlate to less crime? Well, I would look at this in reverse. Rather than saying what places have the least amount of laws and therefore less crime, let's just do it the other way and say what place has the most amount of laws. That would be Chicago. That would be New Jersey, New York, California. Most places where you have the worst crime. I mean, there's memes about the crime in Chicago, and the gun laws are the highest tier there. It's the most difficult to get a gun in all the places with the worst crime. Let's see here. What is the typical gun permit law across the U.S.? In other words, what is the process to obtain a gun legally? We already talked about that. Last question is, let me just summarize it because it's a long one. According to the Bible and religion, what is the stance on self-defense and carrying a gun to protect yourself? Now, I'm not a biblical scholar, so I'm not going to get into this because I know it is a pretty debated topic. But I will say that there are verses in the Bible that say things like, if he who does not have a sword should sell his cloak and buy one. And blessed is the Lord my God who teaches my hands to war and my fingers to fight. There's others as well, but it's pretty hard to believe that your God would teach you to fight if he did not expect you to on occasion. But like I said, I'm not a biblical scholar, not really the person to ask about that one, but that is my stance on it.